You know, Rod, you and I have done a lot of interviews over the years, but I don't know if we've done one quite like this. I don't know if anybody in our lifetime has seen anything like this. This is absolutely crazy, and it is pervasive in everything you do in the National Football League.
Yeah, it's it's less crazy now than when this started in March. And you think back to that time, and I remember, the 2 days right before we closed the offices were the first 2 days of free agency, and we had dismissed all the scouts and all the coaches, but Bob, Matt, myself, and Mike Disner, our salary cap guy, were in Mike's office for basically 18 hours working on signing free agents. We left thinking that maybe we'd be gone for a couple of weeks, and everything would start to get back to normal. And here we are in, almost the end of June, and everyone's still working from home. We did the draft through technology similar to this with, me in my house and Bob in his house and Matt in his house, and communicating through the system of video conference. And so I think we've gotten more used to it. But I'm looking forward to getting back in front of everybody face to face. Even if we're wearing masks, it'll still be nice to see people in person and get the players back in the building and hopefully start the season on time.
Amen, no doubt. And that would be something that I want to hit on in the conversation and what you think the future might look like. But the big news this week is what a lot of people are talking about. And before we get to Mrs. Hamp and what she brings to it, if you could just a moment reflect on Mrs. Ford and her leadership of the organization since 2014, because it has been significant. And as I've said to anybody that has ever asked, when I've had the opportunity to talk with her and you spent every day with her, she is engaged and sharp. And as you said, she just wants to win.
Right. Most people would have been very surprised how involved she was behind the scenes before taking over the team. And her and her husband were incredibly close. And I think they always viewed this kind of as a joint, business that they were involved in. And she attended every game long before taking over the ownership, and told plenty of stories back when she would go to games with the family, and you'd have to make sure you went to the bathroom before the kickoff because you weren't allowed to leave your seat during the game. And talking about games at Old Soldier Field that Mr. Ford would go sit in the booth with George Hallis. Can you imagine that today? Two owners sitting together watching the game, and Mrs. Ford had to sit out in the stands because no women were allowed in the press box. So she goes way back. And I've said before, if you haven't seen A Lifetime of Sundays, the movie that was about her and the three other leading women of the NFL, I would encourage you to do so because it gives you a great insight into her and the history of the league. But back to when she took over, I think everybody, as I said, was probably surprised. And as you said, she just jumped right in and, took the reins, became very involved with the management of the organization at that point, and subsequently made the tough decisions to move on from the president to general manager. And that's when I became even more involved and, was very involved in the hiring of Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia and, day-to-day interaction with all of us on football and business matters. And was in the building regularly. I think attended every single game, in the 6.5 years that she was the controlling owner, and attended every NFL meeting, and became, I think, widely respected within the league and admired. And I don't know that I ever heard anybody, including Roger Goodell, call her anything other than Mrs. Ford. And that shows the level of respect I think that she had. I remember getting an email from another owner, I won't mention who it was, who was a similarly mature owner, had been around a long time, did not use email, had his assistant would occasionally email us to get an email to somebody. And the email was addressed to, Jerry for Jerry Jones, and Bob for Bob McNair, on and on and on. The last name is Mrs. Ford. there was no Martha. It was Mrs. Ford. And as you said, I talk to her, every day, sometimes several times every day. So she's not gone. She's still here, and I'll still be talking to her, and she'll still be involved. But I think she did a marvelous job. She was great to the organization, great to me personally, and great to my family, and I'll forever be indebted to her.
Fans aren't as worried about what happens at league meetings, and fans aren't as worried about what happens in board meetings. Fans just want to win. And as you both alluded to, as Sheila Ford Hamp takes over, that is her number one goal. And to your point, Rod, I have walked into locker rooms after games, and I walked past you. I walk past Mrs. Ford, I walk past Sheila Ford Hamp and her husband, and I see the looks when it hasn't gone well, and I know they feel it.
Oh yeah, they care, with every fiber of their body as to what is going on the field, and they're fans first, I would say, and owners second. And if you can put yourself in that kind of mind, I think that's how they think of themselves, as fans first, and they feel, because of the ownership side of the responsibility, incredible responsibility to the city and the fan base, and they know how much the fans want to win, and they know how much it's their responsibility to deliver that to the fans. And there'll be nobody happier when we do win what we're hoping will be a Super Bowl soon. And there's going to be nobody more upset when we fall short. And that happens, every season and every game.
Give us an idea, if you can, because she alluded to the fact that she's had a terrific learning experience working next to her mother for years, league meetings, board meetings, everything that you need to do as an owner. She's had experience next to her mother. Can you give us an idea? As you alluded to, Mrs. Ford has been very decisive. When she didn't think something was working, she changed it. Do you anticipate the same type of leadership from Mrs. Hamp?
I do. I let Sheila speak for herself on what her leadership skills and approach may be, but I think she certainly has learned from her mom, but she's going to be her own person too, and I think that would be only appropriate and expected. Sheila, in some ways has, experienced the Lions her whole life. And so she's got, virtually a lifetime of experience going to games, more recently becoming more involved in as an owner. And I think that she will be, as she said on the call the other day, more engaged in some of the other aspects of running the team than maybe even her father or her mother have been. And I think that as she grows in this role, she'll take on, things maybe that were different than both of them. But I think the passion for winning will never be different. I mean, everybody shares that.
Rod, we touched on it a moment ago, just what a crazy offseason this has been. It has shown all of us in our given businesses what is capable and what we are capable of. And I imagine it has to be gratifying to you to see the way that the organization has adapted to these trying times.
Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of everybody in the organization, football side, business side. And obviously, as I said, going back to March, no one knew really what was going to be happening and how long this was going to last, and whether we would get back in the office or not, have a draft, not have a draft. And, as I've said many times to our staff when I've talked, all I can do right now is make the best decisions based upon the information I have today. And everybody's just going to have to be patient and be flexible because the world's changing so fast. The decisions we made yesterday might not be appropriate for today. And I think everybody's embraced that. And I think we've been very successful getting a very weird virtual off-season program with the players. Thinking about the players that we've signed and drafted, I haven't even met face-to-face yet. Normally by this time you feel like you're very close to them and you know them well. You haven't seen them on the field, but I think the team is bonded, a lot of it, through, the Zoom calls and the things that teams are doing. And a lot of it, I think, is talking about, some of the other news of the day, the social justice issues that have really rocked the country. And our players have, been, talking about it and trying to figure out what it means and how to, be part of positive change. We've made some public statements about that. So I think all these things added together, it's a year I don't think anybody will ever forget. It's one of those things that happens in your life, that you can point back to and remember when, you were here when that happened. But we're going to come out the other side eventually. And as I said, I'll be looking forward to that too.
And it's a test of leadership. You've watched as on the football side that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have had to pull this thing together. And whereas normally they'd be on the field and doing all the things that they do to get a football team ready, they've had to do it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And they had to figure it out. And we didn't really know, just like I talked about the draft earlier, we didn't know how we were going to do a draft virtually. They didn't know how they were going to do an off season virtually. But with their leadership and immense support from our technology team, who are probably, some of the stars of the organization right now, helping us figure all this out. And it's all worked out. There's been, as far as I know, almost no glitches whatsoever in the technology. You can imagine, I think on the team meetings, there's more than 100 people on a Zoom call, with players, coaches, et cetera. And, they're seeing all the faces, they're talking to one another. You've done some of the interviews where you've had, similar experiences. So it's something that people have adapted to, and we figured it out. And, everybody's in the same boat. That's the one thing that we're not any worse or any better off than anybody else. And you got to deal the cards that have been dealt to you, and hopefully we'll, come out better for it. And I think one of the upshots of it, I think, is, Dave was saying before we got on, there's a lot of things that could be good that could come out of this in terms of how to use this technology.
Sure.
Maybe for some of our coaches, maybe they don't have to live in the building like they have in past years, and they can realize they can actually do some work from home and be effective and, have a better work-life balance and hopefully get better rest. So there's some things I think that'll be positive that'll come out of it. And hopefully we get back together where we can use this technology for the benefits that we'll have learned during this process.
You touched on something a moment ago, too. It is in talking to the players and in talking to Coach and to Bob Quinn, it does feel, one, that a lot of them have learned to work smarter, if you will. But two, you use the word bond. Nearly all of them have talked about how this has brought them together. The situation with the pandemic, the situation with social justice, where they have confided in each other, talked to each other, and it's almost been therapeutic that they've been able to spend time with each other during both of these things that have gone on.
Yeah, and obviously, they're all, driven, competitive athletes that want to win. And this is unusual for them too, because I guarantee you they want to be out on the field playing and practicing. So I think being together and talking about it, and they're all going through the same things. They want to be on the field. They're dealing with the pandemic. They have, families, in some cases, children, spouses. They're stuck in their home with, kids like everybody else that might have young kids, and, having an outlet to talk to their peers and their teammates and their coaches about that, plus the social justice issues, I think has brought the team together in a way that you almost couldn't have done in normal times. It's unusually positive in that way, I think, and that's a good thing.
How has it changed your life as the president of the team, and what your average daily workday looks like?
Well, it's interesting. I guess the biggest change is I'm spending a lot less time in cars, and there's. I'll tell you a funny story though about that, because I think I told you before we got on that after the draft, we ended up going down to our Florida house for 5 weeks before things started to open up back here where I could get back in the building. We came back, my car had been sitting for 5 weeks and the battery was dead. So, so that's how long I was gone. It's changed my life, in the ways that I wake up, I have breakfast, and I go right to my laptop and my phones, and I have usually meetings scheduled, almost every hour, every day. The days go by quickly because I'm busy. My wife and I have kind of figured out how to coexist in a home where I'm working all the time, and I think she might have a greater appreciation for what I do because she's seen more of it firsthand. But that's fine. I think it's trying to balance. I spend time with the football folks, and then we obviously have the business folks, and there's a lot of uncertainty on the business side too in terms of what this season is going to be like with the stadium and fans, and how many fans, and social distancing in stadiums, and preparing for cleaning the stadium. And so there's a lot of effort underway there. With still, as I said before, making decisions based upon information today. I don't really know what September is going to look like. And so you got to prepare for all kinds of outcomes.
Yeah, in these days, Rod, it's hard to know what next week is going to look like. So it almost seems you have to plan ahead because that's what you do. But it is, you do it with the understanding that what you think today may well change in 24 or 36 hours.
Right. It's, there's no doubt. And, things have opened up, and, some states there's been, issues that have, come back with the virus, peaking again. And, I don't know what that may mean for some of those states. And obviously I'm only right now worried about the Detroit Lions and what we're going to do. But we have 31 other teams in other states, and there's going to be conditions in other states that could affect, games being played in front of fans or not in front of fans. And so I try and stay as aware as I can what's going on in other states, particularly states where there's NFL teams and stadiums, and talking to my peers and the league, and trying to get as much information so you can do the best planning you can, knowing that you might have to completely go a different direction based upon a change.
It does seem that the NFL, if it's possible, Rod, was somewhat fortuitous in that you weren't coming to the end of the season like the NBA or the NHL. You weren't getting ready to start a season like Major League Baseball. You were able to conduct a draft. You were able to conduct free agency. And you're still a ways off from having to get guys on the field. So not only that, but you can kind of watch how these other sports handle their business and take some cues off of what they do. The timing, and I hate to say anything was good in this pandemic, but the timing was for the NFL in terms of how it worked out in terms of where your season falls.
Well, certainly comparatively speaking to the other sports, we're in way better shape. And I've talked to my peers in some of the other leagues too. And, I can't imagine, having to cut a season off in the middle of the season like, basketball and hockey had to do, or figuring out how you start a season, after you were, virtually ready to start in baseball with spring training kind of wrapping up and you're ready to head north and start a regular season and everything stops. And now you have to kind of restart spring training again. So I think relative to those sports, we've had the opportunity to not have to miss games so far, not have to truncate a season. We were able to conduct everything virtually, draft, free agency, off-season program. And we will, as you said, get the benefit of watching how other sports restart and learn from that. Golf has started. There's already been a couple of incidents with positive tests there. NASCAR had an event last week where fans were in attendance. You can see how they got people in and out of the stadium there. So we'll watch all those other sports and learn from them. But I don't want to say we're lucky, but we're certainly in a better position than the other sports.
I wonder if you can give us an idea of what daily life is like now in Allen Park. And I know from talking to you, you're not there a lot right now, but you do know how things have changed within the building.
Yeah, we, the building is being prepared for the players to return. That's, as I've said, several times internally, I have two goals right now: everybody's health and safety, and to play football this fall. And so the most important thing is to make sure we have Allen Park prepared for everybody's health and to get the players back in the building. The NFL has created a number of standards that we have to meet in order to get the players back in the building. And so what's going on in Allen Park right now is everything to prepare the building for the return of the players, creating distancing in the locker room, the dining hall, preparing the outdoor fields, making every restroom in the facility touchless, preparing for immense cleaning that's going to be going on during the day, creating new meeting rooms in some cases for social distancing for the players so we can have team meetings in a facility that's big enough for everybody and have them be the 6 feet apart, buying a lot of PPE equipment, preparing for testing. So right now Allen Park is kind of a work in progress to get it ready. I've gone in once. I think I'm going to go in another week or so and do a tour of the building, and we'll be able to show that to the fans to show what's going on there. There's one entrance into the building. You have to fill out a questionnaire before you go in on an app that's sent to our infectious control officer. That is a new position that every team had to establish. And then you get your temperature taken as you walk in the building before you're allowed in. You have to wear a mask when you're in. And it's different, but it's not that different than what's going on in other office buildings and facilities around, restaurants and other things that are going on. I think it's all designed to keep everybody as safe and healthy as possible.
How close, Rod, is the league to deciding when training camps will open? There's been some talk that they might open earlier because they want to get players more on the field experience or practice, which they haven't had during the offseason. And kind of piggybacking on that, how close are they to deciding how long the preseason will be? There's been talk that it might be reduced from 4 games to 2.
Yeah, I've heard, the same reporting. I can only tell you what I know firsthand is, I think the plan is to start training camp pretty much on schedule as it would have been. There is an owner's call later this afternoon where more of this will get discussed and maybe decided. And as to preseason, nothing official other than the current schedule of playing 4 games. I've heard some of the reporting that you just referred to. We'll see what happens with that. Just like I said, I think right now the plan is to play everything as scheduled. Who knows, again, in August and September, whether that will be the right thing to do at the time. And I think the smart decisions will be made by the right people if we have to make any changes. We just have to be prepared for it.
How different do you think it will be in the way that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have to handle things, namely Matt Patricia, when they get those players on the field and they haven't had all the OTAs, the mini camps, and things like that?
It'll be different. We talked quite a bit about it. I mean, there's, obviously for the rookies and particularly the undrafted rookies, it's going to be a challenge because you're going to have less opportunity probably to show what you can do. I think we benefit from, having a coaching staff that has returned. We added a new defensive coordinator and a new special teams coordinator, but, they've been working, with the team for a while. So there isn't going to be major scheme changes. And the new players that we did add through free agency, a lot of them are very familiar with the schemes that we play. So we might have a little bit of a jump start in terms of the familiarity with the players on the field and the coaches with the players, which should be a benefit. But once we get on the field, I think practice will be essentially the same. I think the big differences will be in the meeting rooms and in the meeting, and having less people together and maybe some virtual meetings, just like we're having right now, as opposed to face to face. But I think as we get into the training camp mode, it will start to feel more normal, and I think everybody will start to feel more comfortable, and hopefully that just continues as we get ready for preseason and regular season.
So here's the question that I think a lot of people have. Do you believe that there will be fans in the stands when you play at Ford Field this year?
I do believe that right now, and I think there's two restrictions on that. One will be the league's desire, to make sure we're following all the CDC guidelines on, personal protective equipment, 6 feet of separation, all those things, and then what each state allows. And so we've worked with our governor's office. I have a call this afternoon again to continue to understand the direction the state's going to be heading and what will be allowed. But right now, I think the indications are, as long as things continue on this path, we should start the season on time, playing home games at Ford Field with fans. I can't tell you how many yet, but that's the plan.
Do you get the sense, Rod, that those decisions will be league decisions? In other words, will the Detroit Lions have an opportunity to put fans in the stands if the Jacksonville Jaguars don't? Will those things all be dictated by coming out of the commissioner's office?
I think there's going to be certainly an attention to competitive equity, and not having one team have a distinct competitive advantage because of whatever their state allows. I have not yet heard anything that would restrict us, as an example, and having fans in the stadium because some other state doesn't allow it. I think there's going to be other ways, hopefully, to manage the competitive equity issues. But again, a lot of that's yet to be decided. And I think planning for every possible scenario is what everybody is doing, not only the Lions, but every other team in the NFL and the league office. I do think the main thing that the league is going to be concerned about is following the CDC guidelines, and then secondarily making sure there's competitive fairness to everybody.
You plan years in advance. You are way down the road in terms of the forecast for this football team. How much does this alter your ability to understand the finances for the Detroit Lions going forward? How much could this affect a salary cap down the road?
It's a great question, and you're dead on that it's going to have some effect on the salary cap. I think right now there's a lot of discussion between the league and the players to try and make some decisions about those things now, so that every team, including us, can continue to make those long-term plans, because in the world of uncertainty, we don't know how much the revenue might decline this year, as an example, if there's limited fans in the stadiums, not only here but around the league, because the league is a partnership. We participate and everybody participates in the revenue that we generate. We participate in the revenue that other teams generate. Unfortunately, we have 2 beautiful new stadiums coming online this year, which would have been normally huge revenue boosts for the whole league, Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And they're obviously affected just like we are by this. So with uncertainty as to what this year's revenue will be, that creates uncertainty as to what next year's salary cap will be, because the salary cap is derived from the prior year's revenue. There's a lot of discussion about how to manage that so that we don't have a huge decline in the salary cap, which would make it very difficult, to put a competitive team on the field and deal with long-term contracts. So we're aware of all the questions. I don't have many of the answers yet. Those are going to be things that have to be negotiated with the players and decided, and hopefully it's done in a way that allows every team to continue to manage its current and future budgeting and salary cap planning.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too into the weeds, but just so people know, you guys look at your cap years in advance. You guys have been in good stead right now with the cap. And it would almost seem like you're trying to put toothpaste back in the tube if they lower the cap, and all of a sudden teams are looking around trying to figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? We've got guys signed to contract. We thought we were in great shape. It seems like that would be a major issue, which it sounds like you're attacking now to get ahead of it.
I think that's the plan, is trying to avoid that outcome, and hopefully that can be accomplished. And the other sports are dealing with it similarly. Baseball's had similar discussions, with their union and their players, and it's just, unprecedented times. I've said several times, there's no training for this. I can go back and say in 2009 we did this and that worked. This has never before. And so, you kind of have to, do the best you can, and, be fair to everybody, and, with the mind, as I said, to keep everybody safe and healthy, and hopefully play football. And
I hope you never have to draw on this experience again.
I hope I don't. I can put it in the bank and never have to use it again. But, it's, as I said, there's no training. There's no experience that I can go back and say, I know how to handle this. We're doing the best we can.
I appreciate it, Rod. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and we will look forward to seeing you soon.